So I just wanted to go through a
Yeah,
couple,
take it away.
couple slides first, and then we'll go and get started. My name's Kip Studer. I've met quite a few of you, I think, but I've been working on H2Ohio since the inception. Rob Hamilton wasn't able to get on today, but he wanted me to talk kind of about MyFarms, kind of how we got here and where we're going. So um, I'll go ahead and just run through a couple slides that I put together, just kind of give you guys background on H2Ohio. H2Ohio was announced in 2019 to address water quality issues in the Western Lake Erie Basin and across the state of Ohio. Dollars come from the state budget, and we're allocated. It's been between $40 and $60 million for the last 4 or 5 years now, and so a pretty hefty amount of funding and support. And so we've put together a program. We put it together very quickly. We did it just as we would have done any other program we had in the past, as we didn't have a lot of time to do it. And so we did everything on paper and didn't even recognize the potential workload and everything else that would go along with that. And so primarily we're looking at agricultural practices, nutrient management plans, cover crops, subsurface phosphorus placement to address phosphorus loading issues. And so through those practices, we're trying to do farm scale conservation planning to address phosphorus risk. And so when we started off, we kind of had like a tiered approach, like, okay, let's do 200,000 acres first year, 400,000 the next year, and keep building. When we opened enrollment, we had 1.2 million acres come through the door with applications that kind of caught us flat footed. I would say luckily COVID kind of put a pause on things and kind of helped us out, because we didn't know if we were going to have funding to even deliver this program or not, but we were able to basically take a pause in the program, and we ended up in that first enrollment having about 850,000 contract acres there that we were able to basically slow the program down. Had we had to implement 1.2 million acres, it would have been extremely challenging. But as with this program, right, the momentum was so great, it just kept pushing us to do more. And so if you'd split the counties, so there's 24 counties up on the screen. If you would split them east to west, basically the 14, there's 15 technically, the one to the south, Shelby, those counties were eligible with the H2Ohio program to start off with. Everything to the east of Lucas, Wood, Hancock, Hardin, they came in the summer of 2021. Because of that push and that excitement around the program, there was a push to say, okay, let's make every county eligible for the program that has water that goes into Lake Erie. And so we very quickly made the decision, let's go with all 24 counties. So all of these counties have a portion of their water at least goes into that Western Lake Erie Basin, and that's our primary target for reducing phosphorus out of that program. And so we made them all the county eligible, even though some of them, I think Richland has maybe 10,000 acres going into Lake Erie, but we made the entire county eligible. We have about 4 million acres of cropland that are eligible for H2Ohio. 4 million in the first 14, and we're at about another 1.5. But to date, we're at about 1.8 million acres under contract. And this is about 2,500 contracts. And so roughly where we're at currently is about a third of the cropland is eligible or is participating in H2Ohio. Our goal is to have over 2 million acres by the end of this fiscal year. And so we're at about 1.8 million acres, but we have a goal of making that entire area whole. So we're working with 2 project areas, and we're on slightly different time schedules. And so that's posed some challenges in itself. But ultimately we want to get about 45 to 50% of the cropland into H2Ohio. So just kind of going through the next slide. As with all of this, it is all under a voluntary nutrient management plan. So our keystone practice that we did not recognize originally was a voluntary nutrient management plan. And so for our first rollout, we were paying $2 to develop a nutrient management plan. Now we're paying $10 or even $15 for a precision nutrient management plan. And so we had to reevaluate that part of a nutrient management plan. We're also working with a lot of providers. It's called the Ohio Agricultural Conservation Initiative. And back in 2018, we were very close to additional regulation of nutrients within the Western Lake Erie Basin and also potentially across the state of Ohio. So we had groups come together from the livestock groups, the corn, wheat, soybean growers. They came together, and then our Nature Conservancy and environmental groups came together and said, "Hey, let's do this together." And so when we started H2Ohio, we had some confidentiality clauses on the books, but then that group went ahead and updated it even further so that anything within that nutrient management plan is confidential. So we're very sensitive to the desires of that group and the work that they had put together on a nutrient management plan. And so one of the key things we think is really important is having confidentiality in that nutrient management plan. We can share data at an aggregated level. So we share it at HUC-12 levels and county levels. And we've even talked about taking it all the way down to like potentially township levels. But in general, it's aggregated data that we share with our partners. So that is one important thing I did want to mention. Jumped ahead. So obviously we had a lot of challenges getting MyFarms or recognizing the need for contracting software. We did utilize Adobe PDFs and electronic signatures in the first round. And so we were bringing all that data in and then summarizing it and uploading it into another database we already had that was called Beehive. We were able to bring applications in, we were able to bring contracts in, but we really had a lot of challenges with just the paper managing everything. So bigger side of it was probably the certification and verification side of it. We were still reviewing all this paperwork that was coming in. We were having some PDF certification documents come in, but a lot of it was just paperwork. And so what we were trying to do is look at software companies out there and see if there was anything that had off the shelf that we could use, right? Salesforce, could we use contracting programs like that to manage contracts? But we decided to go another direction. And so we had been in contact with MyFarms since probably about 2019. We made our initial contract, but we did not really see the opportunity until we got this far into MyFarms. And so MyFarms had the contract to do the update to the manure management planner. It really helped. They were relatively local. They were just across the state line into Indiana. And so we had had a handful of contacts with MyFarms, handful of discussions with MyFarms on the topic, but we did not see it until we were about 1.4 million acres into the program of the potential value it would offer. And so ultimately, after several design discussions, we entered into a contract in July of 2023 with MyFarms to build a software platform. They were already a farming software company. They had ran some sustainability programs for cotton. They had the contract for the manure management planner replacement. And so we looked at some of the work they had done and said, if we can make a product that writes a nutrient management plan for a voluntary nutrient management plan here in Ohio and also have the potential for a CNMP, that just makes too much sense for us. And so some of the aspects of what they did, they had to build. So they had to build contracting software, and we still utilize our Beehive software for tracking data, and that Beehive will kind of manage our fiscal side of it. But we develop the contract in MyFarms, and then it goes over to Beehive, and then we handle all our financials within Beehive. So it gives us a little bit of separation there. So everything is not all in one, and so we don't rely all or nothing on one company. If it goes down, we're out. It allows us to have a little more flexibility there and so they've created conduits, APIs, contact points. So along the way, that data gets transferred over to MyFarms and from Beehive and back. So overall, it's been a pretty good solution for us. But I'll be the first to admit that we have ran into quite a few learning challenges along the way. And so with everything that we've done, we decided to go statewide with just the voluntary nutrient management plan here. We actually don't even have an official start date, but our target date is April 15th. So our plan is to recognize the value in H2Ohio. There's a lot of buzz around H2Ohio across the state. And so our plan is to start spreading it out throughout the state. And so here, hopefully in the next 2 weeks, we can roll out the rest of the program to the rest of the state for limited release of about 500,000 acres across the rest of the state. Really just start building capacity and start working that process through soil and water districts. In the Western Lake Erie Basin, kind of that tan color you can see up on the one, we've been delivering state dollars in Northwest Ohio for probably almost a decade. I think 2012 was one of the first large set of dollars came down from the state. We've had pretty consistent funding coming down, probably in the range of $2 to $5 million annually, coming down for that Western Lake Erie Basin to target funding. When we got approved by the legislature for $60 million, we started saying, okay, how can we take this program statewide and start delivering additional dollars elsewhere across the state? So we're going to continue to try to run H2Ohio in that area one with about $50 million, and then take $10 million and go statewide with that voluntary nutrient management plan to really start working on developing staff and the program statewide, in hopes that we can create demand for the program and potentially increase our budget for delivery across the state. So I'm going to talk about just some of the challenges here, and then I'll pause for some questions if you guys thought of any or want me to cover something again. But really the challenges is we've got a lot of feedback because H2Ohio has become a brand in Ohio. And so we have a lot of people who want to participate. Our extension groups want to participate. Our universities want to help. And we've had a lot of challenges with just a lot of the noise in the background associated with it. One, a lot of people see $50 million in a budget, and they want some of those dollars to come to their entity. And so that has been a big challenge is managing through that workload. As soon as we start trying to bring all those folks to the table, it just becomes so much noise. And so from the development of the software, we've kept the group very, very small. It's probably the opposite of what we should be doing in our current status, where we focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. But it's been such a large task. It has been extremely difficult to separate the noise and the desires of everyone, because they want this program to do everything. They want it to meet all the needs. They want it to fund their program. And so it has been extremely challenging to try to, okay, who's here to actually help us versus who isn't here to help us. And we were told by MyFarms that from a national level, NRCS had given them the guidance that state Ohio policy should not get in the way of H2Ohio and what they're trying to accomplish. And so we were kind of given a lot of leeway on what we were trying to do, because we were tasked with, it was a very large task that we were trying to accomplish. And so when we have that leeway, policy issues because the 590 standard that says you need to do this for implementation, that's a big challenge for us. And so we were trying to work through all those, and we got really far without a lot of input from NRCS, but all of our H2Ohio standard says refer to the 590 standard or bounces back to 590 standard. And so we've always had this in our back of our mind that, there's things we probably aren't interpreting correctly on that 590 standard, but ultimately all our H2Ohio standards say we're consistent with the cover crop 340 standard or Appendix A out of the NRCS and 590 out of the NRCS standard. And so we've had that built in from the beginning. The other aspect of it is because MyFarms was building a solution for CNMPs and the manure management planner, they were bouncing everything off that 590 standard also. And so we have had some challenges with that. It comes down to interpretation of those standards that makes it kind of difficult. But from a policy and implementation standpoint, we were given a lot of flexibility on the decision making, and that becomes a really big challenge because we're trying to set logic and code to verify what's being done out there on the farm. And so you need a certain amount of flexibility there, but you also are trying to deliver a product with taxpayer dollars, right? And so we want it to work for a large majority of the people. There are going to be fringe cases that we run into that we're just not going to be able to meet the need of every single producer out there. But we're trying to hit 90%. We're not trying to hit 100%, and recognize that we do need some flexibility to implement a program of this size at the local level. And so we have certainly ran into issues as we're starting to implement the program, but we did not recognize the amount of time. One, we did not have time on our side. We approved a budget in July, and we were off and running with taking applications in September. And so we were building the program as we're taking applications. Don't do that. It's a terrible idea. We thought we were in pretty good standing with the initial runs. Well, as real data started going in, we're trying to verify nutrient management plans that ag retailers are putting in. We have 40 to 50 different ag retailers putting data into MyFarms. We have another 50 soil and water folks putting in data. Some of the data is easily interpreted. Others comes in a different source, and then we're arguing with that ag retailer over the data coming in. So that's one of the biggest challenges we've had, is getting real data coming in, and then having protocol on how to address that issue and how timely we can address that issue. Those are some of the really big challenges we've faced thus far with MyFarms. I will fully endorse everything that MyFarms has done for us. It has been, to say we're at the point we are is truly a understatement of what we thought was going to be accomplished, but we are behind on some things. Everything's not working perfect, but we're pretty far along in the situation, and we feel that overall we're going to be much better off. We have got a lot of pushback from the soil and water districts, right? It's a new program. It's a large learning curve. And so that has been a big challenge. Getting ag retailers up to speed, getting producers up to speed on the new process has been a large challenge. But we think the verification and certification portion of bringing it into a digital format will set us kind of ahead. And so ultimately, we really hope that that will provide us a lot more opportunity. It'll make for better contract management. It'll make for better certification and verification practices at the local level. But that learning curve has been a really big challenge for the soil and water districts. So I'll give a little pause here as I pull up kind of the MyFarms platform if there is any questions.
Yeah, this is fascinating, Kip. And so it sounds like you had some ups and downs with NRCS, but the product that comes out of this platform, is that acceptable to NRCS for like equip contracts?
So that's our ultimate.
That's like one of the things.
So that's always been our ultimate goal, is to have a single platform that would meet both equip and H2Ohio's needs. We're probably falling short in a couple really specific items on 590 standard, but as I stated earlier, National NRCS said, hey, we're not going to worry about that right now because we see the bigger picture of what you're trying to do here and the potential opportunity here. So because MyFarms is ultimately looking at that 590 standard and trying to build it, in most cases, we are slightly above and beyond the 590 standard for H2Ohio. So we've elevated it. So just by writing it to an H2Ohio standard, in a majority of the situations, we're slightly above. There's a handful of discussion points that we could talk about, ins and outs that, 590 says this and this is what you guys have. We've tried to make sure NRCS at a state level here has been involved in all those conversations and decisions. And so that has been very helpful. They recognize what we're trying to do. They recognize ultimately where we're trying to get to. And so we are really excited, and NRCS here in Ohio is really excited about the potential of what this could offer, because they're still verifying the 590 standard through equip or CSP on paper also. And so if they can see that, there's some opportunity there of uploading ag retailers as applied maps and uploading other information straight into a system that they can access, then they can verify it without having to have paper copies or bills and receipts, all that printed off. So they recognize the value in that. So I see I'm about 11.
Yeah, thanks, Kip. I see your hand up, Mike. Do you want to chime in with a question here real quick?
Oh, it's just more of a follow-up kind of to your question, Shauna. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting because like when we're looking at, the issues we have with getting CNMPs done for dairies and such in our state, just because of lack of capacity. I mean, is the goal, if NRCS is supportive of this, and I think this is awesome. This is super, super amazing. And the requirement to have approved CNMPs, that any operation has to have an approved CNMP. So would the idea be that any plan kicked out of this program would be assumed approved, or would they still have to have an individual approval process? Because that's where we kind of are running into a hitch there, that we have to have someone actually approve those plans that's certified to do that.
So it really comes down to the validation process. And so that I can slowly bring one up, but the validation process is saying, okay, we're building a budget that's consistent with 590, and we're making applications that are going to follow that. And so in that validation process, we're writing a plan. Some of the policy issues, right? Some of the people working on this nutrient management plan are not CNMP certified. Ultimately, I'm CNMP certified. I could go in and start looking at these plans and start approving them. NRCS has said, yes, do that. In the state of Ohio, our soil and water boards can approve a CNMP. Are our boards certified? Are they qualified to be looking at a CNMP and knowing what they're looking at? No, but in the state of Ohio, they can do that. And so, or they can rely on technicians to do that. And so that's one of the things where NRCS has said, okay, policy says this, you should be CNMP certified, but they're kind of handling it more like their engineers would, where we have a technician working on it, CNMP certified person reviews it, and then ultimately signs off on it. And so that's kind of one of the big policy things that we've kind of ran into. And NRCS state level says, hey, we recognize what you were doing here. We'll just have to work our way through that. And so we think that's probably a good place to be from a CNMP planning standpoint of it. I'm concerned because we have a lot of people in there making decisions that aren't even apprentice conservation planners. And so a lot of that background data, I don't know if I wouldn't want to say it isn't good, but the decision making, they don't have the background there to make that decision well. And so we're probably missing some of the stuff, but recognize that, hey, some of that will get caught in a review ultimately. So.
Well, thanks, Kip. Yeah, we're about halfway through our meeting this morning. So I think I could go through a webinar on this for a couple of hours because I'm intrigued and definitely interested in what you all are doing. And I think there's some dovetail to a policy topic that we've been talking about, which is trying to influence NRCS policy around CNMPs and the rest of the policy committee folks. Mike Baden put some language together, actually working with our local NRCS, that you've got in your mailbox there. And I think MyFarms could be a tool that we might choose to reference in that language as this is moving in the right direction towards where we think we'd like to head, introducing some flexibility in the way at least our NRCS over here in Washington is interpreting their own policy. Before we let you go, Kip, I wanted any other questions or comments for Kip about what they're doing in Ohio or the MyFarms platform? Go ahead, Claire.
Kip, thank you for walking us through that. You mentioned early in your presentation about the privacy rules in Ohio and confidentiality rules. And I know here in Vermont, we've found it really helpful to share data on a farm by farm basis or parcel by parcel basis. And the way we've done that is by having everybody we work with be a 1619 signatory at, local level, state level, federal level. Does the state privacy policies preclude sharing with 1619 partners?
Everything we share would be aggregated.
Okay.
And so we've ran into that issue on the opposite, right? NRCS won't share data with us. We'll gladly share it. I can tell you right now, we have a data dashboard. You could go to it and we've scrubbed everything. You could see at a farm level exactly, okay, I've got 27 counties in Henry County, Ohio, or 27 contracts in Henry County, Ohio, but I cannot see it, what individual fields that farm is, or what practices they're implementing at that level. And so I think that's the bigger thing that was the concern of this OACI group was field level data, tying it back to a soil test, and then someone wanted to come in and say, hey, that soil test is really high, we want to regulate that field. And so I think that really is what it tied back to. So we'll gladly share aggregated data with anyone. You can access it through some of the state websites. And so we've been pretty open to that. But I think when it gets down to that field level, that's when that is why they wanted to tighten it up so that it could not go down to a field level for data, so that we don't even have to share it. And trust me, we've been asked about 4 or 5 times. Our legalist came back and said, no, we're not sharing that data unless it's aggregated. So we're not you can go to a local county board and see, okay, Joe Smith got a board, their board approved 220 acres of cover crops. If you want to go to that level and look, then yeah, that they can access that data. But at state level sharing data, we've been pretty limited on what comes out, or it's all aggregated.